Hey folks, in today's lecture we will be learning what are arrow function and function expressions and callbacks, where do we use them, what are the advantages of using them. What an arrow function is. So arrow functions are a more concise way of writing the function expression, and it is also called as fat arrow functions. So let us understand this by taking an example, and to do so I'll create a new file and name that callback.js. Now let's write a traditional functional expression that checks if a given number is an even number or not. And then we look forward and convert this same function expression to an arrow function. So to do that, let's say we'll do let is even equal to a function. And this function would take a number as a parameter and we'll keep that variable name as number. Now I'll do a check and see if the number mod 2 is equal to 0. And if the condition holds true, it means that it's an even number and we need to return true. Else we'll return false. Now I'll call this function expression from outside the program. So what I'll do is here outside I'll type is even and I'll pass a parameter 10, and I'll do an other function called is even and pass the value as 21. Let me actually do one thing. Let me just print those values. So I'll say console.log is even of 10, comma is even of 21. Now if I save and try to run the program, you will see it would print true and false. Now that means the program is working correctly. And now let's see how we can convert this function, the function expression, into an arrow function. So to do this, what we need to do is we just need to remove this keyword called as function and add a fat arrow symbol which is equal to and greater sign symbol before the parentheses. So the general syntax looks like a bracket and which will have a list of parameters. Then you have a fat arrow symbol which is equal to greater than symbol, and then you have your parentheses, and inside that you'll have all your function implementation. So if you notice one thing, between the line number 4 to line number 8, we can perform this entire line of code using one ternary operator. To do so, what we'll do is we'll say return number mod 2 equal to 0, and if that holds true we'll return true, else we'll return false. Let us execute the program and see if everything works fine. So I'll go and I'll type node callback.js. If you see, it works fine. So while writing arrow functions, there are certain rules we can use to make our arrow functions more concise. So let me explain what are the two rules. The rule number 1 says that if your function definition has only one line of code, you can eliminate the return keyword and the curly braces. And the second rule says that if your function expects only one parameter, you can get rid of the brackets as well. So, but in case if you have a function, arrow function, which has no parameters, which takes no parameters, then the bracket is mandatory. So using the two rules what I just explained, what I'll do is I will make the isEven function more concise and get rid of the return statement, the return keyword, the curly braces, and the brackets of the parameter. So now after doing this, if I run the program, you will see that we get the expected output, which is true and false. So now that we have learned what arrow functions are, let us look at what are callbacks, because we mostly tend to use arrow functions while writing callbacks. So what is callbacks? Callbacks are heavily used in asynchronous programming, and since Node.js heavily use asynchronous programming, we heavily use callbacks over there. On a technical terms, a callback is nothing but a function passed to another function as an argument, which then is invoked inside the outer function to complete some kind of routine or action. So to understand it in a better way, let's take an example. So for this, what I'll do is I'll write a function that will perform some arithmetic operation. This function will take 4 parameters. First would be the name of the operation. The second and the third parameter would be the numbers, num1 and num2, and the fourth parameter would be a callback. So while calling the math function, we will be passing the fourth argument as a function expression that will print the result. For example, if we pass add as operation name, then the callback parameters will have the reference to the function that prints the result of num1 plus num2. So let's actually complete the function so we have a better picture of what I just explained. So I'm writing a switch case, and based on the value of the operation variable, we will perform the respective arithmetic operation. If the operation name is add, I'll invoke the function expressions, which is callback, and pass two parameters, null, num and num1 plus num2. So there are some standards that JavaScript developers follows while creating a callback, which is rule number 1. The callbacks are always passed as the last argument, and hence we have defined the last parameter of the math function to be a callback. And the second rule is the first parameter of the callback function signifies if there was an error. So since we do not have any error, we set the function parameter as null, which signifies that there was no error, and the second parameter as result, which is num1 plus num2. So now I'll add this for other operations as well, for multiplication, division, and subtraction. So if there is any other operation apart from these four mentioned operation, the add, multiplication, divide, and sub, we will pass an error as the first parameter of the function. So let's implement it. Now that we are done coding the math operation, let's create a new functional expression which will be passing as an argument while calling this math function. So to do so, we'll create an arrow function that takes two parameters, error and data. Then we check if there is any error, and if there is any error, we print the error. Otherwise, we print a message, our callback sent the data and the value of the data. Now that we have done writing our functional expressions and we have defined the math function as well, now is the time we'll call the math function which we have defined. So now to do that, what I'll do is I'll call the math function, I'll pass the parameters. So the first parameter would be the operation name. So I'll pass add. The second and the third is the number. So I'll pass 10 and 20. And the fourth parameter is the actual function. So in our case, it would be the print data which we just wrote. So this is how the entire program looks like. So let me explain to you what happens when this entire code would be executed. So when your program gets executed, the math function is invoked. Since we have passed operation as add, your program execution goes to the switch case add and then calls the callbacks, which in our case is the reference to print data function, which we had passed as an argument in the math operations. After this, the program execution calls the print data function with two parameters. One is null and other one is 30, which is the addition of 10 plus 20. The print data function gets executed and prints out the message, our callback sends data 30. Let's run this and look what the output is. So if you see, it worked and it gives the expected output. So now let's try different combination. Let's even try one with divide, and let's try an invalid operation as well. Let's say a mod operation. So now when we execute the program, you'll see it successfully works for add and divide, but it throws an error when it performs the mod operation. So yeah, that's what a callback is, and thank you.